Hello guys, welcome to the Never Give Up Motivation channel. So today we're going to be talking about the Robertson family. This story is a testament to human survival and the will to never give up despite the overwhelming odds that this family faced. Now you will be stunned at the fortitude, the tenacity and the unbelievable strength of the human mind collectively in this story to forge on from the jaws of inevitable defeat. Such was the character on display by the Robertson family. And boy oh boy, does this story wake you up in the middle of the night just contemplating what you would have done in the very same circumstances. Now this one is a real juicy corker. Anyway, you will be googling this one long after you have heard what really happened. So just a quick one before I get started. Would you kindly live up to your reputation by being the solid and dependable human being that you know that you are, and slide over to that like button and just give it a little tap just to help the cause. Thank you. Now, the Robertson family consisted of 6 family members: retired Merchant Navy officer Dougal Robertson, his wife Lynn, 18-year-old son Douglas, daughter Anne, and twin sons Neil and Sandy, both aged 9. So one day the father Dougal thought he would take his family around the world in a boat to educate his children in the University of Life, as he called it. However, he didn't practice sailing with them before embarking on such a voyage, but he decided that they could learn as they went along, sort of suck it and see. So on the 27th of January 1971, the family departed from Falmouth in Cornwall on board a 43-foot wooden schooner called Lisette, which they had bought with their life savings from Malta after selling the farm that they'd been living on. Now, the kids still have vivid memories of their dad Dougal at the wheel of the boat as they set sail from Falmouth, stamping on the floor and shouting, "Yee-haw!" They recalled him saying that he was actually living his dream at that time and he was in his absolute element. You could see it on his face, they said. So as they were mid-journey, Douglas, the younger son, remembers that a wave broke across the bow and the cold wet spray violently lashed their faces, and the family suddenly got a real inkling that this wasn't going to be a walk in the park, and it was their first indications that they may have bitten off more than they could chew. But nevertheless, they forged on with their adventure. After all, what's a couple of cheeky waves between mates? Over the next year and a half, the family sailed across the Atlantic, stopping at various Caribbean ports and having the absolute time of their blooming lives. A bit later, and during the transit of the Panama Canal, the family members took aboard an inexperienced crew member named Robin Williams, a student hitchhiker, who accompanied them on the next stage of their voyage to the Galapagos Islands and beyond to the islands of the South Pacific, whilst Lynn decided to remain in the Bahamas at that particular time. So it was roughly on the 15th of June 1972, and whilst 17 months into their voyage, the boat was suddenly struck by a pod of killer whales near to the Galapagos Islands in the Pacific Ocean. Yes, a pod of Orca killer whales started ramming bang into the boat with not a care in the world, in what is something out of a horror movie and deeply harrowing and frightening. The whole boat shook and then the keel cracked as it was a splintering noise of wood breaking, as Douglas described it, similar to the sound of a tree trunk being snapped in two. The whales had attacked the boat, splintering it and severely damaging it. The ship was taking on so much water and the family heard this splashing noise behind them. There were these 3 killer whales following the boat with great glee. Now it was accepted that although wild killer whales are not considered a threat to humans, Douglas, then just a teenager, thought he was going to be eaten alive. Well, wouldn't we all? Now, after all, these ferocious little buggers were relentless with smashing into the boat and trying to cause all manner of mischief and shenanigans. I mean, no, relax. What the hell do you think you're doing? Take a long, hard look at yourself, whale, and your actions, you pesky, naughty rapscallion. Anyway, the Robertson family tried in vain to survive the relentless onslaught by the killer whales. And on the 15th of June 1972, Lucette, remember the boat's name, had holes in its sides as it was smashed and pummeled by a pod of Orca killer whales, and sadly it sank approximately 200 miles west of the Galapagos Islands and never to be seen again. Luckily, the Robertson family and Robin Williams managed to escape on an inflatable life raft and a solid hull dinghy with little in the way of tools or provisions. So Douglas said it was a 10-man raft, but it could only take 5 people comfortably. He said that he had bellows to keep it inflated, but they broke after a few goes, so he was forced to blow it up with his mouth. Now, using the dinghy as a towboat powered by a sail, the group made its way towards the doldrums. Now, as you know, the doldrums are known to sailors around the world. The Intertropical Convergence Zone, also referred to as the Itch. It's a belt around the Earth extending approximately 5 degrees north and south of the equator. And due to the intense solar heating near the equator, the warm, moist air is forced up into the atmosphere like a hot air balloon. And because the air circulates in an upward direction, there is often little surface wind and ships can't move as there is no wind. Hence the doldrums. The same way you say when someone is inactive or sad or stagnant, they're down in the doldrums. Anyway, basically they were doing naff all. They were stuck. Now, prior to the main boat sinking, the group managed to get water from it before heading away. But after a while, even this ran out, and then hoping to find rain so they could collect drinking water in containers, they sailed their way on, but it did not rain. And instead, out of sheer desperation, and when there was literally no more rainwater, no water supplies, they had to get creative and even started to drink, wait for it, brace yourself, turtle blood. After successfully catching a few turtles and sharks and flying fish to eat, they also ate fruit, bread, biscuits that they grabbed from the boat and were just about managing to survive for days. Douglas recalled, the younger son, that the group were beset with problems from the moment they set sail on the raft, as the inflatable raft became unusable, and after 16 days the raft was no longer fit for purpose, and so the family of inexperienced crew members fled to the dinghy. It was a 10-foot boat, far over capacity. But despite this, the group carried on, and the 6 people crowded into the 10-foot long dinghy with their supplies, and they then continued to use the wind and the current to their advantage, moving to the northeast islands of Central America. By their 38th day as castaways, they had stored dry turtle meat and fresh water in such quantities on their dinghy, but survival was still looking bleaker and bleaker as the days went on. But then, on the 23rd of July 1972, they were suddenly sighted and picked up that day by a Japanese fishing trawler, Toka Maru 2, that was on its way to the Panama Canal after it had seen their distress flare. Robertson, who had been keeping a journal in case they were rescued, recounted the ordeal in the 1973 book Survive the Savage Sea, on which the 1991 film of the same name was based. Now, incidentally, in an additional YouTube video, I've also made one about a guy surviving at sea and never giving up, a guy called Steve Callahan, who's the main survivor in that video. He had a copy of this book, the Sea Survival book from Robertson, with him a bit later, obviously, when he was stranded at sea for 76 days, and this helped him immensely. Now, this was a story of absolute desperation, willpower, guts to survive, and endurance, and living in hope. For over a month, they battled storms, hunger, thirst, and danger, and despite all of the elements and everything they faced, they showed resilience and grit that kept them going. So finally, after 38 grueling days, they were rescued by a Japanese fishing boat. Douglas later said, "I never regretted the trip, even in the darkest hours." In a funny kind of way, life had a quality to it, the quality of survival, the reward of seeing another sunset, another sunrise. We felt like wildlife must feel in the jungle. To live another day was our only goal. What a story of inspiration and never giving up. And never giving up the hope that you may just make it out of your situation alive when everything, and I mean everything, is up against you. Let this be the story to galvanise you to believe deeply, to believe that giving up is never an option. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this tale of survival. Now I'm off to get a stiff cup of tea, steeped to my liking, and I'll see you back for the next one. Cheers.